So right after we recorded the video that you're going to see, Crytek announced this. I've seen some people's reaction to this, and they somehow interpret this as a win for Hunt Showdown. Maybe not necessarily for Crytek, but they think this is a good thing for Hunt Showdown specifically. And I don't see the metric of Hunt growing. I don't see it. So I think that's them trying to be like, hey, this is our one thing that we have now. Can you guys support Hunt Showdown more? I think kind of that's what it is a little bit. It feels like some people, they think that because Crisis is on pause, they took those devs and now they're working on Hunt Showdown, which means Hunt Showdown has more devs. I don't know if that's the case. Actually, I know they got rid of Hunt Showdown people. It was confirmed by the ex-senior community manager that said that they got rid of Hunt Showdown people. And how does he know that? Well, he says he's friends with those people still. So they definitely got rid of Hunt Showdown people. Even I myself looked around at some Twitter people that I know had like Crytek employee in their Twitter bio. They don't have it anymore. So they got rid of Hunt Showdown people for sure. I'm no like traditional business owner or anything, but I'm pretty sure when a business is growing and they have a bunch of money, they're not laying people off. I'm pretty sure when a company has a bunch of money and everything is super successful, they're getting more employees so they can do more. They're not laying them off. So the video that you guys are about to watch was recorded before this news came out, and you can keep all of this context in mind. I just checked the Steam charts real quick just to see how things are looking and saw that it was almost under 7,000. Live service games are so much more about cranking out money from the community versus like a single player game, which is way more about the experience. Live service games are all about battle passes, skins, DLCs, how to keep you coming back, how to get you to log in every day. This isn't a Hunt specific thing. This is just live service games. They want you to log in every day. They want you to do stuff. They want you to sit at the menu and look at the UI where you're more likely to end up buying their premium currency. And a single player game, maybe it'll have some stuff like that, but not like a dedicated live service game. What this dude says in this video, it's actually very true. This came out 11 hours ago.
We are in the calm before the storm, the eerie silence before the first shot is fired. Live service games almost entirely across the board have been losing players, losing relevance, and hemorrhaging money. While at the exact same time, every major publisher is rushing to go and make the next live service game, or they are desperately clinging on to their existing ones, trying to stay afloat, not realizing that's exactly what's causing
the whole time we watch this. Keep Hunt Showdown in mind.
This problem in the first place, because something's been going on, but nobody's caught wind of it. And it makes a lot of sense. In most cases, we look at gaming failures in a case-by-case basis rather than zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. But when you do, you see that the foundation is starting to crumble. You look around and you see that every player in every community is complaining about the exact same things. You see prices that are skyrocketing and quality that's plummeting. You see microtransactions become the main priority of these companies, monetization become the main priority of these companies, and at the exact same time, communities are dying.
What?
Content creators and streamers who have built their entire career around single games have lost relevance at a rapid rate, and that's a sign of decay. That's a sign of collapse. These are warning signs that a lot of people aren't paying attention to. The industry has overvalued live service games to a reckless degree while undervaluing single player games or just, day one paid for experiences. And most of them have completely abandoned them. Look at EA. They come forward and believe that Dragon Age the Veilguard failed because a lack of live service elements. Yeah, this is reality.
I don't know that game, so I can't comment.
What world do we live in? The best selling and most talked about games over the past few years have almost all been single player games. And I think the vast majority of people will probably agree with me on that. Those are the games that I remember the most at the very least. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about the slow drain on relevance in live service games, the exhaustion of the player base, and why putting all your money and betting all your money on live service has now become a death sentence.
Again, keep Hunt Showdown in mind.
The industry is changing, and I don't think they're ready for it. Now, every single year we go through the same cycle. Players and content creators debating whether or not their favorite live service game is finally dying. World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, Call of Duty, Apex Legends, virtually every major title goes through one of these phases, and for years, it's mostly been hyperbole, but now it's slowly becoming all but inevitable. Whether it's general fatigue, lack in content, financial strain, new game releases, or unchecked issues, players are leaving live service games in droves right now. I've mentioned this before, but Call of Duty has lost nearly all of the players that it gained from the launch of Black Ops 6. A dip in retention is normal, but this isn't a post-launch fall-off. This is a catastrophic collapse. And it's not just Black Ops 6. The Steam launcher is tracking Call of Duty Warzone as well, meaning that all numbers across the board are plummeting. YouTube and Twitch metrics are telling the same story. Content creators who have built their audiences around Call of Duty are seeing a fraction of their normal viewership. Apex Legends lost 70% of its player base in just 1 year, and all the complaints between these two games is almost identical. Lack in variety of content.
But he also comes up with a really good reason for that later on. Like, one game might be the sort of spearhead for like a new genre type, but then copycat games come out and sort of do the same thing, which takes away from that player base, and the original game kind of crumbles.
Reusing cosmetics rather than creating anything new, content that raises the skill ceiling and alienates casual players, persistent bugs and performance issues, rampant cheating.
Hang on, say that again.
Skill ceiling and lack in variety of content, reusing cosmetics rather than creating anything new.
This part.
Content that raises the skill ceiling and alienates casual players, persistent bugs.
Raises the skill ceiling and alienates casual players? I don't think that's happening with Hunt Showdown. Making it more casual, I'd say.
And performance issues, rampant cheating, and yet somehow, some way, the only thing these developers seem to prioritize is monetization. Players are bored, fatigued, and frustrated, while these...
Yeah, that applies. Bored, fatigued, and frustrated, yeah.
These companies behind these games keep extending their hands, asking for more money.
Yes, event after event after event.
This has been a consistent trend because last year, Ubisoft reconfigured their battle pass for Rainbow Six Siege, increasing prices, removing rewards, not adding any new content to the game, while asking players if they'd like to purchase a membership to keep playing the game. Many live service studios have tunnel vision profit and have completely lost sight of the quality of their product and the service that they're supposed to be delivering. That's why they're losing players. I mean, look at what's going on with League of Legends. Riot has always been a studio, for the most part, that has been frequently celebrated by its players. But recently, the developers stepped forward to explain that while player retention is stable and revenue is up, they've come to realize that Hextech chests, a free reward path that many players made their primary way of earning free cosmetics, is somehow not sustainable anymore. And, quote, "We are giving away too much free stuff. Guys, we're making enough money, but we want more." That's essentially what they're saying here. Who the hell greenlit this? These dudes said, we only want you to buy something when you feel it's worth it, yet you took away the only way for players to get free stuff. How did you think this is going to go over? Now, while many live service games have been struggling the past few years, much of it for self-inflicted reasons more than anything else, single-player games have been thriving. We are in the middle of a renaissance, with both indie and AAA games reaching massive audiences and delivering real satisfaction. Hogwarts Legacy outsold Call of Duty. Baldur's Gate 3 is still one of Steam's most played games. Black Myth Wukong shattered Steam's concurrent player records. Kingdom Come Deliverance made all of its money back within 24 hours, and the player numbers continue to rise. The list goes on.
We were just talking about that one yesterday.
We are witnessing a shift. Players are finding more value and are being more valued in single-player experiences. It's hard to ignore all the successes. And I think this is the key weakness in live service games and why they're struggling. Many single-player games still understand what players want, while live service games have lost sight of it entirely. The best single-player games aren't just selling gameplay, they are delivering a complete experience, a world worth investing in, a story worth following. Meanwhile, live service games have become nothing more than a financial experiment rather than a creative pursuit.
That's what I was talking about before. A financial experiment rather than a creative pursuit. The live services focus so much more on the financing, getting you to keep giving money, and like story modes, story games. That's not the word. The other games are so much more about just the gameplay itself, because you already bought the game.
Studios aren't building games for players anymore. They're building platforms to extract revenue. Every update, every feature, every design decision is dictated by retention metrics and engagement algorithms rather than genuine craftsmanship. The result? A stagnant, disposable gaming ecosystem where quality is an afterthought and player goodwill is traded for short-term profit. That's why I find it almost comical to hear that EA's Andrew Wilson, a man who has spent years gutting single-player franchises, is suggesting that Dragon Age the Veilguard failed because it lacked live service elements. It's a perfect example of how disconnected these executives are from reality. They aren't just ignoring the industry's trends, successes, and failures. They're actively rejecting the lessons that they should be learning. In an article written by Todd Black of GamerRanks titled "EA Boss Feels Dragon Age the Veilguard Failed Because of a Lack of Live Service Elements," Todd writes, video games can fail for multiple reasons, and not all of them is on the developer or publisher. There are plenty of cult classic titles that were high quality games. It's just that many people didn't give them the chance. There are also times when games are high quality, but developers and publishers never gave them the big push marketing wise, so people really weren't aware of them and thus didn't buy them. Then there are games like Dragon Age the Veilguard, which had plenty of push from BioWare and EA, but it also had a ton of baggage in the public eye. And that was the key reason why it failed. However, that's not what Electronic Arts feels. While speaking at an investor call, as noted by comicbook.com, EA CEO Andrew Wilson made a bold statement claiming that the reason the BioWare RPG failed wasn't because of a lack in quality or marketing, but because the game didn't have any live service elements to help it connect with gamers. Now, to make sure that I really drive home Andrew Wilson's words, because I want to make sure everybody understands this clearly, I'm going to do this in my best CEO voice, so give me just a second. We know as a global leader in entertainment, great titles, even when built and delivered with polished execution, can sometimes miss our financial expectations. In order to break beyond the core audience, games need to directly connect with the evolving demands of players who increasingly seek shared world features and deeper engagement alongside high-quality narratives in this beloved category. Dragon Age had a high-quality launch, the biggest launch, probably the biggest launch ever. And it was well reviewed by critics and those who played it. However, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market. Guys, I don't know what to say. Andrew Wilson isn't just out of touch. I don't even think this guy is on Earth. I'm starting to wonder if all these gaming CEOs all get together for a peyote retreat in the desert. Live service is becoming Scientology to these people. The idea that Dragon Age the Veilguard failed because of lack of shared world experiences that players crave is laughable when the data shows that players aren't craving shared world experiences, they're craving good games, and they always have. By the way, keep in mind, he is the one that made the decision to revert the game from a live service game back into a single player game. So if he had all this infinite wisdom, where was it when he made that decision? This isn't the first time that EA has tried to push this narrative. Back in 2017, Wilson said almost the exact same thing, that players just don't want linear games anymore like they did 10 years ago. And what was the result of that thinking? Well, EA shut down Visceral Games, the developers of Dead Space, one of the most
I didn't know that.
beloved single player studios that they had, because CFO Blake Jorgensen declared that they had to cut the bridge when you realize that you can't make a lot of money on something. And here we are years later watching EA continue the same move away from single player games and pushing more into live service. Blaming the Veilguard's failure on a lack of live service, to me, is nothing more than a desperate attempt to justify a shift that's well underway. A shift where EA can quietly transition all of its studios into live service factories while cutting out single player development entirely. Because to them, single player is too expensive, too risky, and not profitable enough. And to me, that's a death sentence. I think that by ignoring single player successes and their value, these studios and publishers have lost sight of why players come to play games in the first place. And that isn't sustainable, and we're starting to see the signs of that now. Now, before I get into this, because this is a multi-layered issue that these games and these companies are suffering from, I don't have an issue with live service games. I love live service games. There's plenty of them that I play, but I think that these companies have undervalued single-player games and complete paid experiences, and I don't think they understand those game successes, and I think they're failing to learn the right lessons. Players do not have the time, the money, or the energy to only play live service games. That's not sustainable. We need variety. And in a lot of ways, I think something that they've kind of forgotten is that single-player games kind of act as a loss leader, drawing people into a publisher's ecosystem, building rapport, creating credibility, and strengthening that studio's reputation. Because reputation is a currency. YouTubers know this all too well. Every single time I take a sponsorship, I'm spending some of my reputation, but I can't make everything I do a sponsorship, because reputation and respect has to be earned before it can be spent. And I think there's something to say about creativity as a currency as well. It needs to be generated and nurtured before it can be spent, and there is a finite amount of it. When you only focus on live service games, you are locking your developers into creative purgatory. They don't get to explore, take risks, or try something new. They're stuck turning out the same shit, update after update, working on the same maps, the same mechanics, and the same game without ever learning anything new, never evolving. Hell, I recently spoke with current and former Call of Duty developers when I was getting ready to make this video, and I asked them about the issues that were plaguing their games, and they all pointed to the exact same thing. They are never allowed to do any real engineering or creative work on the IP or its engine. It has effectively been the same thing for over a decade because Activision refuses to give them the time to improve it. Why? Because they have to ship a new Call of Duty every single year. Activision, from my perspective, is the poster child for abandoning single-player games and choking the life out of its own studios. They absorbed Neversoft and Radical Entertainment and then sent those developers into the Call of Duty mines. They killed creativity in exchange for predictable assembly line production, and now their games are suffering as a result of that. Why not let them go back and develop another Tony Hawk Pro Skater or a new Prototype sequel? Let Raven Software go make another Singularity. Let's see how that experimentation and creativity could be used in Call of Duty or maybe an entirely new IP in the future. This is why live service games are failing today. These companies are completely out of touch. Their games are devoid of creativity. They're pumping out copy-paste corporate slop that's only temporarily relevant before players inevitably just burn out from it. Live service isn't inherently bad.
That hits home. That hits home right there.
Handling it, well, the foundation of some of these long-standing live service games is completely rotted out. It's just waiting for somebody else, a slight wind to come by and just
that's true. David,
topple the whole thing over. You know, I was wondering something recently. Why live service games feel so homogenous? And I know a lot of you guys have already experienced this. You look and you see a new live service game come out and you're like, that looks a lot like this other game, but just reskinned or a different theme.
This is what I was saying before.
And the reason why is because they just keep cycling these developers around. Concord, brought to you by the developers of Destiny 2, making Destiny 2 combat but boring and with ugly characters. We're getting Temu versions of games rather than anything genuinely fresh or new. 2K just fired the director of Project Ethos. Never heard of it? That's why they fired him.
I mean, I've said Beautiful Light is kind of like the game mode that Hunt Showdown has, right? Beautiful Light's game mode is basically Hunt Showdown, and I don't remember a game having that exact game mode. You know, open map, you go in, try to you figure out where a special item is. In Hunt's case, the bounty. You get the bounty, or you get the special item, and then you make it to an extract. That is what Beautiful Light will be. So that was obviously heavily inspired by them.
It's ex-Call of Duty veterans that are making a Fortnite copy, just a straight up clone, but diverse. Sound familiar at all to you guys? I mean, Xbox just hired the marketing and operations director of Concord for Halo. Because that's going to work. The biggest issue that I see in these long-standing live service games is that they are losing control of their games, they're losing touch with their audience, and they are unable to do anything about it because they just refuse to stop. Because all of these games, I'm telling you guys, go look. Every single one of them is suffering from the same issues because it's the same people making the same game with the same updates, and they just cannot fix anything. They can never change. They can never evolve it. And they're just waiting for somebody else, some other competition to come by and just knock them out of their seat. And that's exactly what's going to end up happening. And then the cycle is just going to continue over again. And in the case of like EA or Ubisoft or Activision, in their greed, they have stripped the forest bare. They have drained the talent, so there's not even a drop left. And now it's all going up in flames. And something that I don't think they realized, I don't know how they didn't see this coming, the fire's burning a little bit faster than they probably imagined. And the reason why, and it's something that I'm surprised a lot of other people haven't taken notice of, but did you guys know that in 2024 alone, PlayStation had 25 live service games hit their store? That's just on one platform. You add Steam into that pool?
Wow. 25, and they're all trying to have, you know, a bajillion people play them each at the same time. There's just not that many people to go around.
People want the biggest catch, too many fishermen, not enough fish. The pond isn't getting any bigger, it's drying up. See, the problem with chasing trends is that eventually the market is going to reach a saturation point, and live service gaming has already hit its breaking point. The industry's gold rush towards live service games was fueled by the idea of seemingly endless profits from games like Fortnite, Warzone, and Genshin Impact, but as more games have flooded the ecosystem, the reality has become painfully obvious that players are spread too thin, and the industry has created an environment in which, well, nothing feels permanent. When PUBG first popularized the Battle Royale genre, its audience was locked in. There was nowhere else to go, but now that audience is disseminated across countless games: Fortnite, Warzone, Apex Legends, Hunt Showdown, Escape from...
He knows about Hunt Showdown, dude. This is what I was saying before, is how that players are now spread across all those different games.
Tarkov, and the list keeps growing. There's more and more competitors. The same thing is now going on with hero shooters. Once Overwatch ruled unchallenged, but now Marvel Rivals has stolen its thunder. Valve's Deadlock is quietly making improvements, and niche competitors are picking away at the audience that's left. And here's the core issue. The more options that players have, the harder it becomes for any single game to retain its audience. In the past, live service games had a natural monopoly. Players stayed where they had to. Now, the second a game stumbles, well, there's already another game that's ready to take its place. Now, what makes...
Yeah, again, as we've said for Hunt Showdown a bunch of times, there's not exactly competition, so that's why Hunt can kind of do whatever it wants. And people are still just finding other things to play, of course, which is why when we looked before, there was 7,000 people playing. If and when there is a game that is even semi-close, it's going to be a tough time. It's going to be a tough time for Hunt.
Matters even worse is that these companies haven't done anything to actually hold on to their audiences outside of trying to trap them in loops of sunk cost fallacy. They don't build communities, they build financial incentives to stay, flooding the games with battle passes, FOMO driven events, and expensive cosmetics. But there's a massive flaw to that system. Once players leave, they don't come back. And why would those players come back? Because it's not like any of these games are doing anything for them in the first place.
Dude, you know how many times, I'm not even kidding, dude, seriously, the amount of times in the last month that I've had someone in chat say they either took a break from Hunt Showdown and they feel amazing, or they just completely gave up on the game, uninstalled, and they feel amazing. It's been so many people. I'm not I'm not joking, dude. It has been kind of crazy how many people have said that. Not just Twitch chat, not just YouTube chat, YouTube comments. I see that all the time.
They're not delivering on their needs. They're not fixing issues in their game. Heck, they're not even keeping up with industry best practices. Newer live service games like Marvel Rivals have non-expiring battle passes, allowing you to be able to progress it at your own pace. Games like Helldivers 2 are pushing regular, meaningful content updates without the need for excessive monetization. You can earn it all just by playing the game. Meanwhile, Fortnite, the king of live service games, is constantly reinventing itself, offering massive collaborations, completely fresh mechanics, and incentives that actually feel rewarding.
That's smart.
What are these long-standing live service games done to keep up? Almost nothing. Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Destiny 2, they've spent years raising their prices, removing content, and doubling down on aggressive monetization while offering less in return. They aren't rewarding players' loyalty, they're punishing it. And I know this firsthand. When live service games were fresh, I spent money all the time. I'd buy skins, battle passes, cosmetics, all of it. But the more games that got released, I realized that none of it really mattered.
I've told this story a bunch of times when I started playing Hunt, and for a while after I started playing Hunt, I would buy all the DLCs, even if I didn't think I was going to use a skin a bunch. I bought all the DLCs, I bought tons of blood bonds, and yeah, I eventually stopped doing that. The last event, the Post Malone event, I mean, I think the one before that too, even though I'm able to get blood bonds just by playing, I haven't got the battle pass.
All of this stuff was meaningless the moment that I stopped playing that game. And as I moved from game to game, I stopped spending almost entirely because I knew I would inevitably leave. Why invest in something so temporary? Look at Call of Duty. They've tied Warzone to every new entry release in the series, meaning that every single year that there's a new Call of Duty that comes out, all the skins that you purchased, all the camos that you earned, all the progress that you've made, well, it's all wiped entirely clean. Every year, players are starting out in a brand new microtransaction ecosystem where their past investments, both time and money, have been made entirely meaningless because Activision doesn't value your money.
That's so crazy that imagine every Hunt event, all your skins are wiped clean and you don't have any and you have to buy them all again. That's crazy. That's crazy to me.
What is going to be the long-term effect on those players? This is the environment that the industry has created. In their greedy attempt to chase infinite growth, they've now turned every single game into a temporary investment, eventually conditioning players to never fully commit because, well, they know something new is right around the corner. And while we might not be seeing the full effects of this yet, I think we're starting to see the signs of it. EA's been doing the same thing with their sports games, and it's no wonder that year over year, live service money and player retention is falling. Players spend time and money in their Ultimate Team modes only to have that completely erased with the next installment. That's why I think it's nearly impossible for some of these struggling live service games to recover because they've trained their audiences to leave the moment that things get stale. They've made core features feel like an afterthought while monetization takes a priority. They've made every single game feel like a disposable experience, so why should players stay or spend money on them? This kind of loops back to the original discussion I was having before on the long-term consequences of live service games, how the longer they go on, the more the industry loses sight of what actually brings players in. Most of these companies didn't start out making live service games. They had to make games that delivered value up front. They forgot how to do that. They used to have...
I mean, Crisis, I never played any of the Crysis games, but I mean, isn't that pretty much what he's just talking about? Didn't Crytek make Crysis and that was their single player game and that kind of got popular? I always knew it as like a benchmarking software more than a game. And then they made Hunt Showdown a live service game. It's crazy the amount of parallels we can draw with Hunt Showdown in this video.
Have to make an impact on day one, and they had to hold on to that player's attention immediately. They had to be worth the money, because if they weren't, they failed. That sense of urgency and respect for the audience is gone when you turn a game into a routine. Now, beyond losing players in existing games, the oversaturation of live service games is making it nearly impossible to launch new ones. There are only so many players and only so many people have the time, money, and patience to dedicate to a single game, yet these companies keep flooding the market with the same type of game competing for the same limited audience. Think about it. Sony planned over a dozen live service games to launch between 2024 and 2025. Where did they think those players would come from? And better yet, how did they expect for any of these games to be profitable when you're making so many live service games that you're not only competing with the industry, you're now competing with yourself?
Yeah, it's like placing a bunch of bets down and hoping that one of those games blows up.
Or cannibalizing your own games. What did they expect? How did they think flooding the market with dozens of competing live service games, many of them sharing the same monetization models, gameplay loops, and even development DNA, was going to work? Look, live service games need long-term investment from players. They need dedicated time, engagement, and spending to be successful. Yet Sony and a lot of these other publishers keep trying to go with this shotgun approach, launching multiple at once as if players are going to be able to juggle them all. All of these companies are cannibalizing themselves, splitting their own potential audience across too many projects, too many games, and too many financial asks. You can't build a thriving long-term player base when every 6 months you're throwing a new live service game into the ring and expecting it to gain traction. These companies have bet everything on endless live service growth, and instead, well, they've created an unsustainable arms race where games don't have a chance to even establish themselves in the market before somebody else is there trying to take their place. And the funny thing is,
how come, I mean, I talked about Beautiful Light and how it has a similar game mode. How come you don't think there's any other games that have come along sooner to try to compete at all with Hunt Showdown? Is it just because Hunt Showdown never was a really big game? It's like a medium-sized game, right? It's never been a big game though, but to have pretty much no competition over the course of the 7 years or however long it's been out, that's like, they're pretty lucky if you think about it. There's nothing else that really came out. There might have been some Wild West games that came out, Twisted Path to Renown and stuff like that, but that never really took off. But I guess if you look at it from a dev point of view, if you're going to try to make a copycat game, you're going to try to copy a big game because it's a big game. You don't look at a medium-sized game like Hunt Showdown and think, yeah, we're going to try to steal their player base, you know? Yeah, nobody's really tried to come around and make a copy.
Been proven right, because what was the end result of Sony's big push into live service? Well, over 10 of the known projects that Sony has made for live service have been canceled, including the absolute dumpster fire that was Concord, with thousands of jobs lost and hundreds of millions of dollars torched for nothing. The only survivors, Bungie's Concord and Fair Games, which is effectively Concord 2 Payday Boogaloo, and we know exactly how that's going to end. Personally, I can't wait to farm it. Thank you, Sony, for the content. The only game that they actually found success with? Helldivers 2, a game that was a breakout hit, yet Sony found a way to be able to sabotage themselves, wanting to force players into PlayStation login, but luckily they ended up walking that back and the game is recovered. But I'm going to...
You know what? I saw an article or a tweet or something that someone said, you remember how a couple days ago there was a PlayStation Network outage? That's exactly the type of reason why PC players don't want to have to sign in to PlayStation Network to play Helldivers. Imagine you had to sign in to your PlayStation account on PC to play Helldivers. You wouldn't have been able to play on PC. It's totally unrelated and made no sense for PC players to have to do that. And that's why we didn't want it, and that's why they got all the negative Steam reviews when that happened.
Take a wild guess and say that game is not the success that they were trying to bet on. But this was Sony's big bet. They thought live service was the future, and out of the 12 plus games that they were working on, or at least the ones that we know of, only one of them found moderate success. Now they're just stuck cleaning up the wreckage. The reality is that this industry is too competitive and too unpredictable to bet everything on live service. These companies think they're diversifying themselves by flooding the market with live service games, but in reality, they're all just making the exact same game. Every game has a battle pass. Every game wants you to grind for unlocks. Every game wants you to log in daily. And when everything is the same, nothing stands out. And the worst part of it is that these companies know that the gaming audience isn't infinite. They just don't want to admit it. That's why we're seeing PlayStation and Xbox slowly abandon console exclusivity, because they need every sale that they can get. Square Enix and other publishers are finally putting their biggest franchises on multiple platforms because...
I was saying that the other day, so there was somebody in YouTube chat on Xbox or PlayStation, and they were saying on Hunt Showdown, why can't you invite, you know, the opposite console to your lobby? And I was like, man, back when I was on console 15 years ago, that was absolutely forbidden, because there was a gigantic wall in between the two platforms, and you could never play with or against the other platform because it was a different platform. And now they seem to be combining, I guess, which is what he's saying right here.
Exclusivity just isn't sustainable anymore. Xbox is putting Forza Horizon 5 and the Gears of War collection on PlayStation, and allegedly they're also going to end up bringing the Master Chief collection over. I'm all for ending console exclusivity, and honestly, Xbox is making a smart move in doing this, but let's not pretend that this is happening because of some consumer first mentality. This is happening because these companies are desperate. They've overexpanded, overestimated their own success, and now they're scrambling to fix the mess that they've created. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point, but I don't think that video games and publicly traded companies are a sustainable combination. Games are nuanced, creative projects. They do not fit into the corporate mold of ever-increasing stable profits. Investors and executives thought that live service games were the golden ticket.
That was a good point. I had to think about that for a second. Games don't fit into the corporate mold of ever-increasing profits.
Stable profits.
Damn, that's true. I mean, you look at a regular business, and the goal is to have constantly increasing profits. That's the goal. Games don't do that. I mean, you can make a lot of money like Epic and Fortnite, but that's the 1% of 1% single game that does that, you know? That's a really good point.
Investors and executives thought that live service games were the golden ticket. They thought that this was the first way to industrialize an industry that was, by nature, unpredictable. But the reality is, it's impossible. Every game is a risk, every design choice, every mechanic, every update, they all carry uncertainty. You need that in this industry. That's how games grow. That's how these successful live service games came into existence in the first place. You cannot manufacture guaranteed success in an industry built on creativity and innovation. They're trying to turn gaming into something predictable, and it's like forcing a cylinder through a square hole. It just doesn't work. These games need to evolve. They need to be different. Developers need varied experiences. Players need varied experiences. But instead of fostering creativity, these companies have suffocated it, dumping all of their resources into the same few live service titles year after year. Eventually, they're going to hit a wall. They're going to realize that there's no fuel left in the tank, and when that moment comes, they won't have any creative ability to make anything new to pull them out of that death spiral, because they've spent all their time maintaining the old. But the bigger issue here is that the industry is expanding faster than the player base. The number of games keeps increasing. The number of customers isn't growing fast enough. There's too much supply, not enough demand. And it's not just AAA publishers that are running the show anymore. Smaller studios, indie developers, and solo creators are all claiming their share. Developer tools are getting easier to use. The barriers to entry are lower than ever. And these corporate giants just aren't competing with each other anymore. They're competing with the entire gaming landscape. And that's a fight that I don't think they're prepared to win. And I don't think it's a fight they can. There are so many factors working against these live service games that I'm surprised that we haven't seen more issues pop up.
Cue the TikTok
We've
video.
seen some of them over time, gradually, slowly but surely, but I think it's all starting to pile up, and it's going to turn into a massive fire here in just a minute, especially with some of these larger established franchises. Because keep in mind, what is Activision without Call of Duty? What is EA without their sports games or without Apex Legends? What is Ubisoft without was it Rainbow Six Siege? Like, these are the things that are holding these companies together, and without them, they are in a world of trouble. They are in a world of trouble. And how could you not see this coming? You could take any factor and point it directly at the live service industry, and it becomes a problem. Let's look at economics as an example. If I go to buy a video game, I don't really regret that purchase. I don't feel bad for making it if it's a game that I wanted, as long as it's good and it doesn't have any problems, which that usually never ends up being a problem, because I don't pre-order games or anything like that. I wait to make sure it's actually good before I purchase it. Well, I never have a problem with that. If I go to buy a microtransaction, I always feel dirty. I feel weird. I need to shower afterwards, because
isn't that how you feel if you buy a Hunt DLC? Come on now.
It's not necessary. And if it is necessary, if it's part of power progression or whatever it is, a gacha game or something like that, then it feels even worse, because I don't want to be buying those kind of things. Those are the exact opposite of the microtransactions I want to see in games. And then it feels even worse as a result of it. Now go and add any type of economic strife on top of that. raising prices, inflation, and people having a hard time finding jobs or whatever. Now they're going to make it even more difficult for them to be able to justify those purchases in those games, regardless of whatever their price is, because they know it's temporary. That brings on another problem because of the fact that these experiences are so temporary in the first place. Market is flooded with these games. There's so many different live service games to play. Look how many gotchas you can play, how many first-person shooters or battle royales or whatever. I don't feel like spending money on this stuff because chances are I'm not really going to give a shit about it in about a month or 2 or 6 or whatever it might be. I know I'm going to walk away from it. You got games like Call of Duty or the sports games that literally just erase all of the money that you spend regardless. So what's the point of even spending money over there?
I don't get that at all. I don't get how people put a dime into those. So maybe it's kids spending their parents' money. I feel like that's such a cliche thing to say, though. Why would anybody keep buying skins for a game that resets every year?
Yeah, it's inevitable at this point that these games are going to run into some serious issues. And again, I'm surprised that it hasn't happened sooner. I think the real reason why we've seen such a big push into live service, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, there's no way that they couldn't see the long-term effects of live service games. And then I realize they do. They know it. Because all these decisions are being pushed by CEOs that rarely ever face consequences for their actions, that are there to drive up revenue as much as they possibly can, drain the well, make money for the investors, and then jump ship as fast as they can. So then they can leave it for the next guy to find out that the whole thing's about to collapse. And then they get to be the guy that can try to save the company if they can. Or you can be like Bwabcat and you can just sell the company to Microsoft and look like a hero. Good job, Bobby. There's so much more here that I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of this. I'm going to do the deep dive video on Call of Duty. That's going to be coming up pretty soon. I might end up doing that next week maybe, but that's going to uncover more of these issues, I think. That's a really interesting case with that game. But man, I really do feel like it is just the disposable nature of these games. That's probably the biggest thing that's becoming probably the biggest issue for most of them, is that there's just too many of these games in the market. They're replacing each other too quickly, and everybody is constantly looking for the next game to jump ship to. And over time, not only are you going to have all these disposable games, but you're also going to have the audience that is spread out so much that most of these games likely aren't even going to be sustainable in the first place. They're not going to be able to make enough money to hold on to enough developers to even make content to keep players playing those games in the first place. I think that's a big problem that they're going to run into. Too many games. Like I said before, you got too many fishermen, not enough fish. And that's going to become a really, really big problem. And at the exact same time, the other thing is that I just think that live service games kind of, fly a flag in the face of like how these studios got started in the first place. Because the only reason that they got to make these live service games is because, well, they made single player or multiplayer experiences that weren't live service games before. And that's how they learned to get the ability to even pull players into their games, to make fans, to create this ecosystem that they have. And the further they get away from that, and the more they only pay attention to this byproduct of the industry, the more they're going to lose sight of what actually got them there in the first place. And when I look at the quality of the games and the quality of the content that's delivered to players, I'm seeing a direct correlation. I don't know about you. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, share it with your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, follow me on Twitch, link is in the description. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
That was a good video. I thought, if you think about Hunt Showdown the whole way through, that's pretty interesting. Sounds like a lot of the same stuff I talk about with Hunt might not be a Hunt specific thing. Might be a whole live service game thing entirely,